Watching the full view, while there are increasing calls for the scrapping of e-tolls and VAT increases, ANC members marched onto the union buildings in protest, saying the poor bear the brunt.
Thousands of ANC members, the Tripartite Alliance and civic organizations brought the Pretoria CBD to a standstill. They demand that high data costs and e-tolls must fall. The party believes the technology in the gantries should be put to better use and bemoans the effect they have on the poor.
By e-tolls, we are not referring to that technology. We want that technology to chase criminals. We want that technology to make sure our roads are safe in Gauteng. Government should resist the temptation to look at VAT increase as an easy target for dealing with fiscal pressures, because this will hit the poor. The poor will be hit the hardest. In this regard, we call on the HN review the decision to increase VAT by 1% point.
Minister in the Presidency, Jeff Radebe, received the memorandum on behalf of President Cyril Ramaphosa.
That some of the demands that we have put here, some steps have already been taken to address them, including the issue of data and the allocation of spectrum, because the Minister of Telecommunications and Postal Services, Dr. Kwele, has already done so, but we need to do more in order to ensure that your demands are met.
The Transport Minister also shed light on the e-toll saga.
We're discussing with Sandra, we are discussing with the President, and we're going to be engaging all other stakeholders to try and find a lasting solution to the issue of e-tolls.
The ANC in Gauteng says e-tolls should go before next year's elections.
Well, joining us in studio is Chief Executive Officer of the organisation Undoing Tax Abuse, Mr. Wayne Duvenacher. Very good evening to you, sir. We thank you very much for your time.
Nice to be there.
Essentially, before we get into it, are you happy with the outcome of today's march to the union buildings?
We're happy with any march that gets the message across loud and clear. I think what we are seeing is a political element now creeping in. We're getting closer to political season, the elections next year. And so, yeah, I mean, the turnout was excellent, but I think it was a bit of an ANC hijacking of something that COSATU was starting, and civil society movements, the taxi association. Nonetheless, it was a good march, good turnout, and we hope the message is clear.
You know, just looking around the support and some of the mixed messages that we are seeing as we do approach elections next year. In the Finance Minister's midterm budget report, he also continued to encourage motorists to pay their e-tolls. What was your stance on that?
Our stance is that when he claims this is an efficient user pay scheme, that is quite laughable, really. You know, Tito is a very wise person. I think he's good. He's going to be a good Minister of Finance for this country. But on the e-toll matter, he's got it completely wrong. Because when 75% of the users don't pay and you cannot enforce your own laws, you start suffering from this crisis of legitimacy. And the real issue here is that this is a user overpays. It's a gross abuse system against Gauteng motorists. And the reason we say that is, had SANRAL got all the revenue that they invoiced for, they would have got 34% of their revenue from 1% of their road use. That is not a user pay scheme. That is a user abuser scheme.
Now, in terms of SANRAL, we just heard from the package, the Transport Minister, Blade Nzimande, saying that he has been in talks, he has been liaising, and you, of course, were shaking your head saying that he hasn't, of course, spoken to us.
He hasn't engaged with civil society. We've been at the forefront of this fight for 6 years now. We called exactly what would happen. It would fail as a scheme because it relied on e-notice, which is inaccurate. It relied on the post office. It relies on good enforcement. R2 isn't even in play, and R2 is going to be the next failed system. And so at the end of the day, what we have is government going against the will of the people. And it starts to suffer from this crisis of legitimacy when it cannot enforce its own laws. And it's not that we don't want to pay for our roads. We know we have to pay for them. It's not that we're against technology. Technology like this is good when it's in the right context. But this scheme was always going to fail. And Nomvula Mokonyane was the premier at the time who endorsed it. So now we have this flip-flop of a provincial ANC fighting with national ANC. And they're so confused and trying to turn this into a victory, we see, from a political stance point of view. But this is a victory victory for the people. The people have defied the scheme and brought it to its knees.
And of course, it is quite confusing. We've seen the Gauteng Premier of Gauteng, of course, David Makhura, not supporting e-tolls.
Yeah.
And then on the other hand, we have national level government supporting it. And we saw that today also with ANC members showing full support of OUTA this morning.
Yeah, and you know, it's quite strange. There's Jeff Radebe on the stage. He was the minister who endorsed and signed, without applying his mind, signed into place this scheme when Sanral put the files on his desk. He was the minister guilty of what has happened here. We saw that come out in the Western Cape case, where Sanral lost to try and introduce the same scheme there.
So what do you make of his presence today at the march?
This is politics at play. This is the farce of politics. This is why politicians need to step aside and start listening and walking hand in hand with civil society. This is why we've got to get politicians out of local government as well, and more independent people into local government, so we can stop the squandering and the maladministration and waste. Same thing happening at national government. This is like so confusing. Just join the dots and you'll see that this is a farce.
Politics aside, is this not going to somewhat aid OUTA in its campaign against calling for the scrapping of e-tolls?
Oh, absolutely.
And seeing the support that
absolutely. It's what we call sanity prevailing after years of trying to force the scheme to work, and it hasn't worked. Eventually they've got to come around and realize that sanity has to prevail. So of course it blows wind into our sails. But will they learn? Will they learn that not to introduce policies that just make no sense, that are irrational? And we're warning government, the next one, and they haven't listened, is the R2 policy around road traffic fine management. They have run roughshod over the public engagement processes. We have warned them. They're not listening. The same thing's going to happen, and it's going to start dragging itself into vehicle licensing. It's starting to get messy because they really are trying to bring about administration that just doesn't make sense.
Are there any government departments that OUTA actually has spoken to and has facilitated talks from, apart from the Ministry of Transport?
Yes, we are working behind the scenes and talk to a number of government departments. We are actually working with enforcement agencies a lot closely. All of our submissions to the State Capture Commission are being perused now. The Special Investigations Unit, a number of people are working with us, and we have given them a massive amount of mileage, saved them years of work through our analysis of the Gupta leaks, and we're seeing some really good work taking place behind the scenes.
In terms of accountability, Gupta leaks, fraud and corruption, yesterday President Ramaphosa fired the former SARS Commissioner Tom Moyane. Do you welcome the move?
Very much so. I mean, absolutely. Tom Moyane, in a very short space of time, decimated a world-class organization. We now have to go and build capacity there. When I say we, SARS, this country has got a lot of fixing to do there. Mark Kingan is a good person, whoever the next appointed commissioner is. We believe that Cyril Ramaphosa will find the right person. But yeah, Tom Moyane was so bad for this country. We have lost billions of rands. We've got to go and build that capacity again.
Thank you very much for your time this evening. That was OUTA CEO Wayne Duven.